Interesting question. Well, people seem to believe that the invisible hand of the market, the great capitalist dream, brings the cream to the top, that the best artists are being discovered. Well, here's a stat. In the last 10 years in New York galleries, in influential, the best New York galleries, only 20% of the artists that have shown have been women. So unless you believe men are better at art than women, certainly it's not a meritocracy that's being produced. It's not great for artists. Although a few artists win the lottery, like Damien Hirst, the rest of artists do part-time jobs, sell no art. 95% of them do things like working as assistants for Damien Hirst. And when the economy goes down or when White Cube fires them, they have to try and find another menial part-time job. Artists aren't benefiting from art fairs. Who has the power with art fairs? Is it the artists? Is it them who are the VIPs who go in first to the art fair? No, it's the collectors. It's the guy who, before he was an art collector, he collected Star Wars figures or fine wines or vintage cars. It's those people who the galleries pander to. It's they who are the most important people because they have the money that buys the art, that pays the bills, that pays for the money to get your £6,000 stall in Frieze. If you think hedge fund managers are the best people to run the art world, then you may have seen what they've done to the economy. It's corrupting of art as well. If you want to be in an art fair as an artist, you have to produce a standard product. You have to do something consistent, because no one wants to buy a piece of art if next year the artist does something different. So you have to carry on working in the same way with the same work. And if you speak to artists, it's one of the worst aspects. The lucky few who actually sell their work, they're stuck selling the same thing and churning out the same type of art with their team of assistants. And finally, it's not a fair or a free market. The selection committee for the 2009 Frieze Art Fair, Gavin Brown, director Gavin Brown's enterprise, Daniel Buchholz, Gallery Daniel Buchholz, Sadie Coles, director Sadie Coles, Marcia Fortes, director, Toby Webster, director of a gallery. They're all galleries in Frieze. It's a cartel. It's the people who run the shop, who run the art fair, choosing the other people who can come into the magic circle and be able to sell their work and get the status of being in that art fair. So it's neither a free market nor a fair market. And yet it promotes itself as having, I quote from the Frieze website, the leading artists, the exhibiting galleries representing the most exciting contemporary art galleries working today. Well, actually, they're the galleries that are the best galleries at selling work, and they're led in by the other galleries. It's like the OPEC cartel. Finally, and this is maybe the saddest part of being in part of the art world, is that you end up spending your entire time sucking up to rich people. And he who pays the piper calls the tune. It's not cost neutral. You might think that in every business you have to suck up to rich people and powerful people. But those people, their taste, their choices become what art is. Those people sit on the museum boards. Those people choose the galleries for Frieze. Those people decide which artists can earn a living from being artists. And they may not have some sinister agenda, but their agenda is those of a very few rich people who are not the same as all of us, not the same as the artists. Well, all of us, i.e. people like me, artists. So I didn't become an artist to make lots of money. I could have been a lawyer, as my dad always says. I actually really love looking at art and thinking about art and seeing art. And I think art fairs, the big problem is that the artists are the sort of bottom of the heap, bottom of the hierarchy, and money makes artists servants. Money should be the servant of artists. And artists should have the power, not a few rich people, not a few important people. The first people in the art world who should have power are artists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jasper Joff. I was hoping for a heated debate, and with you, Jasper, we are well on our way, so that's fantastic. So now, in perfect timing, we have Matthew Slotover, founder of Frieze Art Fair.
Well, since Jasper was so heated, I think I should answer one or two of his points. Interesting, that question about women artists and using that as a reason why the commercial art market, doesn't represent the best artists. I'm just looking at Jasper's fair. How many women artists are here, Jasper? Out of 55, 16, I think it is here. You know, so you haven't exactly done your bit. And I also wanted to answer the point about the selection committee. That's a really interesting one. We think it's the fairest way for galleries to select their own kind, if you like. And the galleries get criticised on 2 points. If a gallery doesn't get into the fair who's friends with the gallery and who shares artists with them, they say, I didn't get in because they think I'm competition and they don't want me in there. If they don't know the gallery and they don't share the artist, they say, I didn't get in because I'm not part of their gang. So the poor selection committee, they have a difficult job to do, but we think this is the fairest way of doing a fair. You can always criticise it, but we think they know the galleries best. And since I'm the only one here who really works on an art fair, I'm sorry, I thought you were an artist. I hope, as with Jasper, you'll forgive me for talking a bit about what I do and giving some examples from the fair. I know Jasper did. A couple of anecdotes. At the first art fair in 2003, visitors walking around would encounter a gallery stand, empty but apart from 2 young children. Children walked up to visitors and recited a list of artworks by Tino Sehgal. Tino's works are not paintings or sculptures, but situations that the buyer can then enact. At times, the children would ask visitors questions, and visitors would ask the children questions. But if visitors tried to photograph them, they complained that photographing the work was not appropriate, and they'd fall to the floor. Sehgal's work takes the tradition of conceptual art, pushes it a step further, and it really forces us to consider what the limits and the definition of art is, and makes us experience art in a completely new way. For almost everyone at the fair who saw the work, this is the first time they'd experienced it. Had a huge impact on me and lots of people who saw it. Such is the impact of the piece that he soon offered exhibitions in galleries and museums. And 2 weeks ago, he ended a 6-week solo exhibition at New York's Guggenheim, where he got rave reviews. Now, being that Guggenheim is not the only monitor of success, but it certainly is a major monitor of success. And if you come to Frieze that year, 7 years ago, you would have seen that work first. That would have been the first place to experience his work. There's another example. In 2006, Mike Nelson created a whole labyrinth of rooms constructed behind gallery booths, revealing a deserted darkroom with photographs documenting the build of the fair. The installation was deliberately not signposted. A couple of unmarked white doors led to it. You either had to know about it or stumble into it. Only a few hundred people did. But Roberta Smith from the New York Times, when she was talking about her top 10 memorable events of the year globally, mentioned this piece as one of the top 10. The next year, he was shortlisted for the Turner Prize, partly as a result of this piece at the fair. I could name more. Rob Pruitt made a flea market at the fair. Paolo Pivi had a grass slope that you could roll down. Elmgren and Dragset did a double gallery booth where half of it absolutely replicated the other half, so you walk past it like a déjà vu. Roman on Deck's Q, Louisa's mentioned already. Chris Martin did a 1-minute silence during the opening of the fair. There's many more. My only point really here is that you can see great art at art fairs. I'm the first to admit that art fairs are not the ideal place to look at art. They're not museums, they're not galleries. It is impossible to see everything, and there are a lot of other people there, getting in the way. But this is more than made up for by the huge range of art on display. You don't get that opportunity anywhere else in the world to see such a range, globally and by so many artists. Art fairs are places where art is bought and sold. That is their primary aim. And Richard has talked about the anxiety around art being bought and sold. And this really, I think you're right, is the crux of the discussion, and one that is, it's kind of too long complicated to go into here. My general feeling on the market is that it's a positive thing. It allows artists to pay their studio bills and make art, and anything that does that can only be good. It's also the contemporary Robin Hood. It takes from the rich that Jasper hates so much and gives to the poor, who are the artists. Does this mean art fairs are just about money? I don't think so. We do surveys at Frieze of visitors, and 85% of the visitors to the fair say they're not there to buy, they're there to look. They're there to see the art, and that's what they're there to do. I think that's the final proof for the motion. Thank you.
Question about fairs and money and their relationship to art is raised. This is a very fundamental question about what the use of art is, why we have it, why in this country we very recently signed up to pretending to like it. Are we going to go on spouting ignorantly and clapping because of the sort of social climbing values that Matthew and his magazine and Fair stand for? Or are we going to think about the thing itself, about art itself, and what's the point of it? Long ago in this country, we didn't have anything to do with it, really. We laughed at it and we sneered at it, and it really was the domain of the wealthy. And recently, there's been a great social change with a lot of confusion about wealth and values, and art, in a way, is a barometer of those confusions. We go to the Frieze Art Fair in order to not be Philistines, and in order to partake in the sort of the culture of our own moment. And we realize, because of many signals that we receive through the media, through chat, through the ether, that it would be ignorant to put down the appalling drivel that art gallery people spout at you when you ask them about their awful art in Frieze Art Fair, the illiterate nonsense that they speak. And we have to say, oh yes, that probably is very good. Wasn't there a time when art had sort of something serious to say and was connected to something fundamental in our being, and wasn't sort of wholly identified with consumerism, as it is at the Frieze Art Fair? And which Matthew sort of invented and was so lamely defending just now. But what is fabulous about the Frieze Art Fair is the first 10 minutes of utter stimulation. When you go around there and you see a lot of new hot stuff, the stuff that is striving to be like the latest successful financial model. And after 10 minutes of that mixture of joy and unpleasant stimulation, one feels a bit sort of depressed, followed by sadness and a real sort of empty feeling. But what the fair is very good at providing is a lot of sort of outreach programs that compensate for the affair's essential horribleness. And that is things like what Matthew just described, various installations and discussions and chats, where somebody will get up and intellectualize or do something a bit off the consumerist mainstream track. And there we have the real problem of the matter. The very question, art fairs are more about money than art. The answer is built into the proposal. A fair is a fair. It's by definition is about trade and money. So that at a fair, art somehow is connected to the thing that is most weak about it, and that is the fact that it has to sell. What is most strong about it is found elsewhere, in other contexts, the art gallery or the museum, or reading a book about art, or if you're lucky enough to make a visit to an artist's studio. Of course, an art fair is one of the ways in which people encounter art. It's a recently revved up phenomenon that we've all started to enjoy. But all I'm saying is not that it's hell or that it's the worst thing that ever happened. I'm saying it's the worst in the list of the ways of encountering art because of its essential selling nature. That consumerism is not the thing that art is about. Art is an antidote to consumerism. And you're always looking for antidotes, marvelous, profound, and glorious antidotes to the problems and the seediness and the creepiness of life. You don't want the dark side of existence to be confirmed by art. As Matthew, in all his loveliness, has just confirmed. And Norman often mistakes the sort of thrills of embracing darkness with the sort of essential banality of the boredom of consumerism. So I'm saying to you all, please do vote the right way, because it matters a lot in terms of your consciousness of what art is, what it's for, why we have it, why it is useful to us. We know that socially and economically it is only there, actually, to keep a market going. But in terms of philosophy and spirit and what it feels like to be alive and the short time we have on earth, it's there for very different reasons. And so we want to really applaud the things that art can do that are absolutely nothing to do with fairs. And we do not want to celebrate the nonsense and sleazy sadness that my unfortunate, deluded colleagues on the wrong side of the panel are here tonight to sell to you in some kind of creepy way. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Matthew Collings. And now, as the last speaker, to speak against the motion, we have Sir Norman Rosenthal.
I hate art fairs. I hate going to them. But listen to the motion. Art fairs, all about money, not about art. Well, of course, just not true, for a start. And secondly, one of the things that I always say is that there's no moral imperative to be involved with art. But if you are involved with art, and there are all sorts of different ways of being involved with art, it is a wonderful way of living your life. And art fairs are a part of that. I mean, it's one way of encountering art. It's not the only way. If you only go to Frieze Art Fair, or if you're some Central European super rich person, only go to Basel, or if you're some South American crook and you only go to Miami, that is not being involved with art. That certainly is not big. But on the other hand, art fairs are an extraordinary forum for seeing a great deal of art and also supporting artists. Because artists, lots and lots of artists get, when I was young, the art world, for example, in London, was incredibly tiny. There were two kind of what you might loosely call avant-garde or new art galleries in London. One was the Liston Gallery, the other was Nigel Greenwood. That was all there was. About 100 people would be kind of involved in this world. You would go, and I mean, if you weren't at the opening, people would say, why weren't you at the opening? I mean, now the art world, there are hundreds of galleries in London. Art has suddenly become, for better or worse, a huge global industry. And there's no way you can escape that. And even my dear friend over there, who alas I haven't met, Mr. Joff, he knows that perfectly well as well. Art is a global industry with endless thousands and thousands of people participating in this industry in many, many different ways. And one of the ways that one participates in this kind of world is, of course, through the art fair. It is, of course, not the only way. I mean, for example, if I can just speak for myself. About a year ago, I went to see I chanced upon a wonderful exhibition in an art gallery in Vilma Gold, as it happens, a gallery that one goes to in London. And I saw a wonderful artist there called Stephen Rhodes, who had a huge, big installation, which would, if it were in this gallery, would more than fill this space. And then I happened to be in Miami, where I was invited. Perhaps I shouldn't have gone. Very immoral of me to go to Miami. I won't tell you what I got up to in Miami. But, I happened at one of the minor fringe art fairs to see an incredible, beautiful work by this guy, Stephen Rhodes. And he was an incredibly interesting artist. And within this work of art is an artist who I think is very extraordinary, a young artist who somehow is very engaged, both in a kind of Rauschenbergian way, but in a neo-Rauschenbergian way, with American history. And I saw a very, very beautiful object, which I thought I could cope with in my own way, quite relatively small, a very beautiful object. And of course, I bought this work of art. I could just about afford it. I went to the art fair and said, Norman, under no circumstances will you buy any art, but I like supporting artists and I like supporting things. And, since I've left the Royal Academy, I earn a good deal more money than I did before. Now that I'm now I'm retired from the Royal Academy and I'm a freelance person, I earn a little bit of money and I'm very happy to put some of that money back into the world of art and to support young artists. It gives me huge, huge pleasure. And I'm now engaged in a dialogue with this artist, as I am with many artists in that way. And I think it's the dialogue of artists and encountering things, and there are many, many different places in which you can encounter works of art. And it's a kind of full-time job to encounter works of art. You can encounter, of course, you can go from gallery to, you need to go from gallery to gallery to gallery. And in the old days, people used to go to the summer exhibition of the Royal Academy, and the vicars used to come up from Oxfordshire with their wives, and they ought to think, by going to the summer exhibition of the Royal Academy, I'm interested in art. Of course they weren't interested in art. To be interested in art is a full-time job. And of course you go to biennales and you go to art fairs, and I mean it does provide you with a huge amount of information about this very funny thing called art. Art is not something you can say, I don't know what art is, but I recognize it when I see it. And of course it's partly subjective, and partly it has to do with a kind of general consensus, you know? So that that's one of the beauties of being with art. And to be with art is a wonderful thing to do. And I do think that art fairs are certainly about money. Of course they're about money, because we, as Richard himself said, we, you know, our whole world is about money. And if Mr. Joff doesn't think, I don't know how he supports himself, but I imagine as an artist, he has to support himself. And he's very happy if, as an artist, somebody buys his work or gets hold of his art in some shape or form. And of course, if you can get it for free, fantastic. I mean, I wish I'd known about his art and gone and found my Marlene Dumas, or indeed...
...market nor a fair market. And yet it promotes itself as having, I quote from the Frieze website, the leading artists, the exhibiting galleries representing the most exciting contemporary art galleries working today. Well, actually, they're the galleries that are the best galleries at selling work, and they're led in by the other galleries. It's like the OPEC cartel. Finally, and this is maybe the saddest part of being in part of the art world, is that you end up spending your entire time sucking up to rich people. Stuck selling the same thing and churning out the same type of art with their team of assistants. And finally, it's not a fair or a free market. The selection committee for the 2009 Frieze Art Fair, Gavin Brown, director Gavin Brown's enterprise, Daniel Buchholz, Gallery Daniel Buchholz, Sadie Coles, director Sadie Coles, Marcia Fortes, director, Toby Webster, director of a gallery. They're all galleries in Frieze. It's a cartel. It's the people who run the shop, who run the art fair, choosing the other people who can come into the magic circle and be able to sell their work and get the status of being in that art fair. So it's neither a free percent of them do things like working as assistants for Damien Hirst. And when the economy goes down or when White Cube fires them, they have to try and find another menial part-time job. Artists aren't benefiting from art fairs. Who has the power with art fairs? Is it the artists? Is it them who are the VIPs who go in first to the art fair? No, it's the collectors. It's the guy who, before he was an art collector, he collected Star Wars figures or fine wines or vintage cars. It's those people who the galleries pander to. It's they who are the most important people because they have the interesting question. Well, people seem to believe that the invisible hand of the market, the great capitalist dream, brings the cream to the top, that the best artists are being discovered. Well, here's a stat. In the last 10 years in New York galleries, in influential, the best New York galleries, only 20% of the artists that have shown have been women. So unless you believe men are better at art than women, certainly it's not a meritocracy that's being produced. It's not great for artists. Although a few artists win the lottery like Damien Hirst, the rest of artists do part-time jobs, sell no art, 95% of the money that buys the art, that pays the bills, that pays for the money to get your £6,000 stall in Frieze. If you think hedge fund managers are the best people to run the art world, then you may have seen what they've done to the economy. It's corrupting of art as well. If you want to be in an art fair as an artist, you have to produce a standard product. You have to do something consistent, because no one wants to buy a piece of art if next year the artist does something different. So you have to carry on working in the same way with the same work. And if you speak to artists, it's one of the worst aspects. The lucky few who actually sell their work, they're